Hello, it's once again closing time here in John Kay's bookshop, and I'm just going to jump straight into today's video. It's the Shakespeare authorship question. It has once again raised its ugly head, this time in the form of Oliver Kamm. I don't mean to imply that he has an ugly head, but he has voiced his disgust that the London Library is hosting a Shakespeare authorship discussion featuring the author Elizabeth Winkler. Now, if that name's not familiar to you, last year Winkler published Shakespeare Was a Woman and Other Heresies, a sort of historical overview of the Shakespeare authorship question. Now, Oliver Kamm has condemned this discussion that's taking place at the London Library and expressed his disappointment with them for agreeing to hold it, saying that the Shakespeare authorship question is anti-intellectual, baseless, and the stuff of conspiracy theory. He likens it to Obama birthers, 9/11 truthers, and UFO cults. And I think this is, on the face of it, very silly. The authorship question is not baseless. The notorious lack of documentary evidence of Shakespeare is base enough to start asking questions. Neither is it anti-intellectual. There's a bit of an irony, in fact, of him using that term, since the authorship deniers are often characterised as having a bias against the supposedly untaught William Shakespeare from Stratford writing the plays, and instead having to replace him with either someone university educated, provably university educated, or an aristocrat. Now, just to make my own position clear, this is by no means a kind of coming out video. I am not an anti-Stratfordian, far from it. I am a Stratfordian until further notice by the principle of Occam's razor, if nothing else. But I have read many anti-Stratfordian books and enjoyed a great deal from them and learned a lot from them. Even if I disagree with their founding premise, they are still fascinating histories. They can contain fascinating insights into the plays. For the most part, I enjoyed Winkler's book last year, which I'll talk a little bit more later on. But Kamm is pretty hard on Elizabeth Winkler. He says the only thing you ever need to read on the Shakespeare authorship theory is not Miss Winkler's worthless tract, but James Shapiro's Contested Will. Now, that is anti-intellectualism, saying there's only one book you ever need to read, don't seek any alternative opinions, and calling it a worthless tract is a little bit unnecessary and not exactly accurate either. He's got previous with Elizabeth Winkler. He has responded to one of her articles in the past by equating Shakespeare authorship with Holocaust denial, which is again taking it a little bit far in my view. This isn't the only case this has happened. Jonathan Bate's been accused of doing the same thing. He's quoted in Winkler's book as saying something along the lines of, first you have Shakespeare authorship denial, the next step is Holocaust denial. And that was kind of what I wanted to talk about a bit in today's video. Being disappointed by people who are on your side. Oliver Kamm seems like he is probably, like me, a Stratfordian by the ferocity of his response, just as Jonathan Bate is. And not to sound horribly Twitter mobbish, but this isn't a very good look, I don't think, for the Stratfordians to be accusing the opposite side of being Holocaust deniers, calling their books worthless tracts, and comparing them to things like the Obama birthers, a racist bunch of conspiracy theorists. And there is a recurring attitude of Stratfordians being haughtily too good for the question. To come back to Jonathan Bate, he debated Alexander Waugh, who is one of the most prominent current supporters of Edward de Vere as the candidate for the real Shakespeare. They had a debate that's on YouTube. It's entertaining for all the wrong reasons. I think both of them do quite a crap job. Alexander Waugh, because he sort of disagrees with the motion of the debate. And Jonathan Bate, because he kind of takes this relaxed, slightly patronising attitude to an opponent who isn't talking total nonsense. And I think that's a shame, You can't strike the attitude of my position is as self-evident as the earth being round and then go to a debate and neglect to bring up the simple formula that proves the roundness of the earth. And the other problem I have with it is the attitude of just poo-pooing it and wafting it away contributes to this really annoying sense of the question being incredibly taboo and heretical, as if there's some giddy, whispering Dan Brown element to all of this. Elizabeth Winkler says in her book that bringing up the subject of the Shakespeare authorship in certain circles is like making a deeply offensive profanity. I mean, unless you're perhaps a top-ranking RSC player or someone who's high up at the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, where it is potentially hazardous to your employment to suggest that Shakespeare wasn't born here, or Shakespeare didn't write the plays, you're not going to be treated as if you've just uttered a deeply offensive oath if you suggest you're not really sure if Shakespeare was Shakespeare. You might get some frosty looks at an academic conference in Stratford. I mean, it's a real jungle out there, kids. Of course, in years gone by, Shakespeare was revered in terms approaching divinity. He did become a kind of poetic god of the English language. But Winkler, now characterizing current Shakespeare academics as being of the high priesthood at the cult of Shakespeare, is just a little bit stupid, in my opinion. And it also misrepresents those academics who have repeatedly engaged with this question. They don't shrink into the shadows of their hood at the mention of the name Edward de Vere. Stanley Wells, Paul Edmondson, Jonathan Bate have all repeatedly appeared in documentaries, debated people who have come up with alternative candidates. Now, this whole it's a heretical topic, none must speak its name attitude gets propagated on both sides of the argument. People like Oliver Kamm are contributing to it by reacting like this on Twitter, an inappropriate response in my view. And it's in things like Elizabeth Winkler's book. But once you get past that element of the book, I think contrary to Oliver Kamm, it's actually a very worthwhile book in plotting out the history of the authorship question. It also presents a pretty lively character study of the people involved in the question on both sides now. There are aspects of that I had a huge problem with, like in her portrayal of Stanley Wells, I think she overstepped the mark a couple of times, but I found her portrait of people like Alexander Waugh extremely entertaining. Waugh comes across as a vengeful intellectual, gleefully slinging whatever he can across the aisle at the Stratfordians. It's fairly late on in the book by the time we sort of meet Waugh properly, but by that point, the question is seemingly more honestly represented as an academic dispute. The world is fairly well mapped out as the Stratfordian base of operations, the opinion of different academics around the world, and not some sort of conspiratorial battle of different spiritual cults. So anyway, I think it's good that the London Library is having a discussion of Elizabeth Winkler's book and the Shakespeare authorship question in general. It will hopefully continue to add some much needed oxygen into this atmosphere of cloistered secrecy and silliness.